We thought we'd escaped from our psychotic guide, but when we got home, he was waiting inside!
The fat in the... I'm frightened of nothing, not even hellfires. Just don't let me ever be played by Mike Myers.
Have you ever heard of a show called The Simpsons? You know, the show with the people who are totally funny and relatable? Oh, I forgot to mention, they're also the yellow people. The Simpsons is without a doubt one of the most popular animated shows that's ever been produced. The show alone has made over $75 million, not including movies and merchandise.
You are crazy ugly!
So I think it's safe to say the show's done amazing. Even though the show has gained so much money over time, you'd be surprised how much the show's gone down in decline. This is where I pose a simple question that has so many different answers. Why did The Simpsons start to decline? Before I answer this question, I want to talk about my experience with the show. I've always heard of the show as a kid, but I never really watched it. That was until about 6th grade. I remember trying to find new shows to watch, and that's when I found it. I started watching random episodes, and I eventually made it my goal to watch every episode of The Simpsons. I heavily underestimated how long this would take me because at the time the show was in its 32nd season. However, time was not an obstacle because mid-binge, the sickness I can't mention so I don't get in trouble by YouTube hit during my spring break, and I ended up finishing the series a month later. I started mid-September 2020 and I finished sometime in April 2021. For those few months, all I watched was The Simpsons. I would literally get in trouble for being distracted because of my goal to finish the show, and my mom wouldn't let me watch it. I feel kind of bad for this, but I would just watch Futurama instead when she wouldn't let me watch it.
I'm unstoppable!
If you're seeing this, Mom, I'm sorry. With that being said, let's get into why The Simpsons started to decline. The Simpsons first aired back on December 17th of 1989, with his first episode being a Christmas special. It would soon begin airing regularly in January of 1990. Simpsons had a rather slow start, but the show would start to pick up in popularity over that later year. The Simpsons centers around a dysfunctional family of the modern era, but with a demographic of the 50s. It's no wonder the show did so well in its earlier years. It's a show that many people can relate to. According to the show's creator Matt Groening, the family are creatures of consumption, envy, laziness and opportunity, stubbornness and redemption. Just like the rest of us, only exaggerated. Since the show was doing so well, the producers kept putting out season after season. Let's talk about the golden era. If you didn't know what the golden era is, it's the best of The Simpsons. The seasons in this area are usually seasons 1 through 10, and there are many other opinions on the best seasons, but a general consensus is that season 1 through 10 are the best. What makes these seasons so good is that they're truly funny, and they have a sort of realism to them that later seasons start to lose. You can tell that the writers and everyone behind the show really spent their time coming up with jokes, plots, and so on. Conan O'Brien, a writer from the earlier seasons, had this to say about the writing process. You write an outline, then you revise every single joke in front of everybody. Then you do a first draft, and then you do a second draft, and then you do another draft. Then there's a read aloud with the actors, but then it goes off and then it comes back and there's an animatic. But there's still time to fix the jokes and revise them. By the time an episode came out, you had maybe heard the script and read through it like 20 times, and for some reason if the joke weren't landing on the 21st time, you had to rework it. It's clear a lot of work was put into these earlier seasons, and that's not to say the later seasons weren't worked on as hard, it's just that the writing styles of those earlier seasons just worked so well. Let me explain how the views are counted. From my understanding, earlier seasons 1 through 11 were counted as household views, so it discloses the amount of people watching in each house. Seasons 12 and so on were counted with total views, which I'm pretty sure is counted by the total amount of people watching on any device. Different from before because households only calculated on the houses watching, so I think 1 view per house. So what I'm going to do, since seasons 1 through 11 were counted by household, is multiply the house views by 3, which was the average number of people for a family around the 90s, and that's how I'll have a rough estimate of the views. Before I move on, I want to give a quick disclaimer. I didn't get very much information off the wiki about the views. I just kept seeing like household and whatever total views. So from what I've researched, I'm pretty sure it's just like they counted the household like one person instead of like if 3 people were watching one screen, that just counts as one person. So don't take it with a grain of salt because I could be wrong, but I believe this could be a plausible solution. But again, taking it with a little more than a grain of salt, because there could be some error, because it was a little confusing. With that being said, let's move on. Just by taking a look at the earlier seasons, you can see they did phenomenally better than the later seasons. Season 1 got around 40.2 million average views from each episode. Season 2 got about 36.6, and Season 3 had about 36 million average views per episode. Then you hop to around Season 12, and you can see each episode got about an average of 14.7 million views per episode. From Seasons 1 through 10, you can see how the show did really well, even with the change in formula and the writers, but as the years go on, you can see less and less people tuning in to see what the Simpsons are doing this week. The more and more the seasons go on, the less views they get. I think it's pretty evident that the show's decline in the early 2000s was simply due to its lack of ingenuity and repetitive nature, but as the show kept going on, I can't help but think the show's decline is not just for its faults, but for the era of social media, streaming platforms, YouTube, and other forms of media. Cable's slow decline starting around 2013 was another big loss for the show's view. Now that I've informed you a little bit about the show, let me introduce you to Mike Scully. We'll call him Mike for short. Mike was one of the show writers from the end of Season 5 to Season 12, and he was put in charge around Season 9 when the show's previous runners and executive producers Bill Oakley and Josh Winston had left. Around the time of Season 9, the show started to lose some of the things that made it special. Take for example Season 9 Episode 2, The Principal and the Pauper. A party is thrown for Skinner since his 20th anniversary of being principal of Springfield Elementary. While the party's going on, a man bursts through the door and says he's the real Principal Skinner. The fake Principal Skinner admits that he's not really Skinner and that his real name is Armin Tarmazarian. Armin then goes on to give his explanation about stealing Skinner's identity. Armin says that he and Skinner were in Vietnam together and the real Skinner revealed his dreams to be a principal when the war was over. During the war, Skinner took Armin under his wing and they became close friends. One day, Armin hears news that Skinner had been lost and was presumed to be dead. After Armin had made it back from the war, he decided to tell Skinner's mom that Skinner had died, but when he gets to the house, he's too heartbroken to tell Skinner's mom and instead decides to pretend that he's the real Skinner. Back in the present day, everyone's mad at Armin for stealing Skinner's identity, so he leaves Springfield. While Armin's away, no one seems to like the new Skinner because they can't seem to get along with him and they just want the old Skinner back. After some convincing, Armin finally decides to move back to Springfield. However, there's one problem. They can't have things go back to the way they used to be because the real Skinner's back. This is where the different writing styles can really be shown and observed. The town's solution to get Armin back as Skinner is to force the real Skinner to leave town, not by saying, hey, you need to leave, or by any mob mentality or anything like that, but they literally tie him to a train and force him to leave town. No one ever spoke of what happened again, and they really put the meaning of out of sight, out of mind. This episode wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. You could tell there were new writers for the show, and I'm not saying Mike Scully was a bad writer by any means, but this episode just didn't seem like the classic Simpsons. Some of the reason for this episode not being great might be the very wacky plot. One of the main reasons The Simpsons became so popular was because of its semi-relatability, but this plot just seemed kind of far-fetched. Don't get me wrong, identity theft is a real problem everywhere, so I can see how it's somewhat relatable, but the ending of this episode really broke that realism. Another reason the episode was so disliked was because of how it ended. Everyone seemed to forget what had gone down from the past week or so, and they just moved on. This really gets rid of the opportunity to build on Skinner's characters now that everyone knows he isn't really Skinner. But because everyone reset everything back to normal, we no longer get to see some of the more obscure sides of Skinner, and there's a missed opportunity for more episodes of Skinner in his old life. I sometimes wonder if the ending had changed just a little, maybe we could have gotten a few more decent episodes compared to what we got. I know that I've only been saying bad things about this episode, but to be honest, it's kind of hard to find good things about this episode. This episode wasn't bad by any means, especially compared to some of the later seasons, but nothing stood out all too interesting to me. I just don't like this episode. It didn't keep my attention like many other episodes had. I didn't feel invested, nor did I relate to it while watching it. This episode seemed like it just didn't fit in the formula the show had at the time. The one thing that I think they did well was make it memorable, with its one-of-a-kind wacky plot, which is a recurring theme in later seasons. People will remember episodes like these, but not for the right reasons. Now that I've talked about an episode that has a notable difference from the classic Simpsons, let's talk about an episode that holds a very special place in my heart, and it might be one of my favorite episodes. Let me tell you about Marge Be Not Proud, an episode that stands the test of time of how good it is. In Season 7, Episode 11, Bart and Lisa are watching TV when they see an ad for a hip new game called Bone Storm. Bart really wants this game, so he goes up to Marge to try to convince her to get the game for him.
But I need Bone Storm or go to hell. Bart?
Young man, in this house we use a little word called please.
But like expected, she says no. This really upsets Bart, which leads him to sulk around until he sees Milhouse, who has the new game. Bart tries to join Milhouse, but gets kicked out of Milhouse's house in the funniest way possible.
Mom! Bart's swearing!
Hey, what the hell?
No,
Damn it, I wasn't swearing.
right now. Out.
This bit had me cracking up every time. Anyways, Bart is so down bad for the game that he goes to the store to look at the game. When he's at the store, he sees some people stealing items, which gives him the idea to do the same. Right after Bart makes it out of the store, the security guard catches him stealing the game and takes him back to the office to have his parents called. When Bart's parents are called, they don't answer, so the security guard leaves a message. When Bart leaves the store, he races home to get rid of the tape recording that had the message from the store security. The next morning, Bart is told that the family pictures are going to be taken at the try and save. This immediately freaks out Bart because he was told to never come back or else there would be serious consequences. Back at the store, Bart sees the security guard lurking about. When time for pictures comes, Bart rushes everyone to get in place because he's worried about getting caught.
Store detective. Hey, Ansel Adams, let's go. Take a photo.
And right when the picture is taken, Bart gets caught by the security guard. The guard tells Bart's family that he was caught stealing, but no one was convinced. That was when he puts in a tape nearby that showed Bart in the act. When they got home, Homer yells at Bart and Marge just sits there in silence with a 1,000-yard stare. Eventually, Marge comes up with the conclusion that she's babied Bart too much and she should start treating him like a man. The next day, Bart seems to struggle with being a supposed man, and he questions if Marge still loves him. After a long day, Bart has had enough of being secluded because he's the black sheep of the family, and he returns to the try and save. When Bart gets home, he looks like he's hiding something under his coat. When Marge notices, she gets a hold of the item, only to reveal it's a perfect photo of Bart that she could never get. The best part of the photo is it's paid in full price. Marge is so thrilled to see Bart learn his lesson, and she's glad to have her baby boy back. We then leave off with the family enjoying their beautiful Christmas Eve. This episode is a perfect example of what The Simpsons used to be. The plot is so simple yet effective. We get to see so much about the characters like Marge and how she gave Bart the silent treatment because she didn't think Bart was who she thought he was, and how she ended up being very forgiving when Bart had shown that he learned his lesson. We also get to see more of Bart and how easily he can be influenced into doing illegal things for the sake of wanting an item so bad, but then making everything right in the end because the hurt and pain wasn't worth the stealing of a game. This episode provided so much depth to the show and the characters, and it also made them seem so much more relatable to us. By having characters have faults, moral problems, and struggles, they seem to come to life, and the situations they experience seem like something that is very likely to happen, especially with younger people like Bart because they're so impressionable. I can see this happening in my life as a kid, maybe not the stealing, but more so something that is so beyond my character and my mom just in shock that I ever do something like I did. Moving away from the character death, I want to talk about another reason this episode's so great. And that would be the humor of this episode. It doesn't have the best joke of the series, but there are some pretty funny jokes. The amount of times I cracked up while watching this felt so uncountable. I love the part where Milhouse yells, "Bart's swearing," and Bart gets dragged out of the house by Milhouse's mom while he's trying to explain what happened. She won't listen.
All right. Go.
Milhouse, what are you? Okay, I won't bug Milhouse.
That cracked me up so bad. Another funny part was when Lisa was putting fake snow on the tree and she said she was starting to get dizzy, and I thought it was so funny because I feel like a lot of people back then related to this because they didn't know the harm of chemicals like asbestos and fake snow. I know that The Simpsons has evidently been worse than it used to be, but with that being said, there's still some hidden gems in later seasons that shouldn't be overlooked just because they're associated with bad seasons. One episode I want to point out for being a hidden gem is Barthood. Where do I even begin with the masterpiece of this episode? This episode is a parody of Boyhood, a great movie that encapsulates the life of a boy growing up into manhood and the many challenges and ups and downs one may face. The episode Barthood shows us the life of Bart Simpson and his struggles with family connections, sibling rivalry, I don't know why I could say that.
Better than new. In some ways, this was kind of a blessing.
I got gumption.
And acceptance. In the episode, Bart really struggles to live up to his sister Lisa because she seems to have all the brains and is praised for her smarts, while Bart is just left his side. This episode also has some great side plots that coincide with the main story, like how Bart and Homer don't have the greatest relationship, so throughout the episode they both make attempts to make amends. This episode is so overlooked and I don't see many people talking about it, probably because it comes from later seasons, so it's automatically dismissed as a good episode for most. This episode deals with so many deep subjects and problems, which the show doesn't do much of anymore. I know I've talked about the relatability and how important it is, but I feel like it's a big reason why everyone loved The Simpsons so much. So for them to make an episode about Bart's life and his issues and struggles, you don't just get to see more of Bart and his character, but you get to see more as a family as a whole. Before I move on, I really want to point out the ending of this episode. Throughout the whole episode, Bart resents Lisa for seeming to be better than him. Towards the end of the episode, Lisa finally confronts Bart for always blaming her for his problems, when in reality, Bart had talents that he didn't take advantage of, so he had no reason to be mad or jealous. Bart seemed to be angry, so he storms off. A few years later, Lisa and Nelson visit Bart in his bike shop where you can see art and murals on the wall. At the start of the scene, Bart and Lisa's relationship seems a little gray, and you can't really tell if they made amends. A little later, Bart offers to buy a couple drinks for the three of them, and right before they leave, Bart shuts the garage door and locks up and reveals a mural of Lisa on the doors. Lisa goes to grab her purse that she left behind and sees the murals. We then get a nice heartwarming scene of Bart and Lisa finally making up after all these years of hate and resentment. I just love this episode so much, and it's definitely in my top 5 favorite episodes. If you want to check it out, it's the 9th episode of season 27. The Simpsons is still one of my favorite shows to this day, but because I grew up with Disney XD, certain shows like Gravity Falls, Amphibia, and The Owl House still remain my favorite shows, and they deserve videos themselves, but The Simpsons comes close behind as my favorite show. I always find myself coming back to the show, whether that's for old or new episodes. Whatever the case is, the show has a special place in my heart, and no matter how bad the show gets, I'll still continue to watch it. I almost feel as if the show's earlier seasons have planted a seed in my heart, and my love continues to grow for the show, even though it's gotten a bit stale and repetitive. Even with its 30-something seasons, the show's been very enjoyable and it's kept a good fan base to keep the show running season after season. To be honest, it's kind of sad to see the show lose popularity over time, but I'm just glad to see the show still running and getting renewed season after season. I'm glad I've been a part of the community and I'm going to continue to love and support the show. In my opinion, the show was, is, and will always be one of the greatest shows that's ever been produced. Hey guys, so this was my first video essay, so I really hope you guys like it. Sorry for the different quality of mic and stuff. I'm still figuring out how this all works and stuff. I literally have never used a mic outside this video, and so hopefully it's not too bad. I don't think it is. I tried fixing stuff in editing, so yeah, I hope it's good. I know as the videos I make go on, I'm sure it'll get better and better because I'll know what I'm doing. But with that being said, let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, and I'd love to hear you guys' favorite episodes and just anything that you guys thought was interesting about this, or any like topics about it. If you guys could like and subscribe, you don't have to both, but either one helps a lot. If you guys do that, I can put out more content like this, and if you have any more suggestions for future videos, I'd love to hear them. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next one.